Rock Paper Shotgun just put out a top 50 FPS PC games of all time list, and I really like it when websites do those because it gives me an excuse to get all riled up and complain about stuff. So I wanted to do a quick video going through their list and fixing it the way that I would do it instead. It's not going to be scripted. I'm just doing this from notes, so if you don't like my unscripted rants, or if you're from the RPG Codex, hi, you're probably going to dislike it. Obviously, the original list is just the opinion of the writer, so there's going to be some authorial bias, and then the changes that I would make to the list are my opinion, so it's going to have all sorts of my bias. I shouldn't really have to disclaimer that, but some people tend to think that when you put an opinion in video form, that means you're claiming it as gospel. And that's not the case. I don't state things as my opinion because they're the things that I'm saying. You should be able to put two and two together and figure that out for yourself. So they talk about how their criteria precludes a game like System Shock 2. So, spoiler, System Shock 2 isn't on the list. And they say, well, that's because it's not an FPS. And that's right, but then they go and break that criteria a bunch of times, as you'll see when I get into the list. So, I do think they're correct to not put System Shock 1 or 2 on the list, or Deus Ex, because, you know, they're excellent, or Thief, I mean, any of those kinds of games. Magnificent games though they may be, no, they're not really shooters. I mean, you could shoot people in System Shocks 1, 2, and Deus Ex, but that's not really the focus of the game, and if you judge them just as an FPS, then yeah, they wouldn't be all that spectacular. Usually when I see these lists, they're just sort of an excuse to put, you know, great games or games that people like on a list. Like, let's just celebrate these games, and they don't really hold true to the criteria that they set out. On the one hand, it's good that they are saying, you know what, we're talking about first-person shooters, so System Shock 2 is great, Thief is great, Deus Ex is great, but we're not going to talk about them on this list. That's good, but again, we'll get into it later. Times where clearly the authorial bias gets in, and they're like, I like this game, I'm going to put it on the list even though it's clearly not a first-person shooter. Another one of the interesting things is that they left Duke Nukem 3D off the list. And they give the dumbest reason for it. They just said, the first level was great, the rest of it wasn't that great, and then it's not that funny in hindsight. Okay, in hindsight, I mean, almost no comedy is funny in hindsight, but forget about the comedy. What about the multiplayer? The multiplayer in that game was hugely inventive and fun because it has such interesting weapon variety that do more than just different types of damage, like shrinking people, freezing people, all that stuff is cool, trip mines, remote bombs, all that stuff. Then there's the realistic environments, far beyond just level 1. There's sort of a realistic feel to a lot of like the city environments, and also having a protagonist with a kind of a in-your-face attitude, or baditude as we used to call it in the 90s. That was, you know, pretty new and pretty special, as well as the interactivity of those realistic environments, something that a lot of games sort of copied onto afterwards. And then, of course, the build engine, which, I mean, yes, 1996 build engine and Quake engine both came out. Yeah, maybe the build engine not so revolutionary, but at the same time, there's a lot of good games built on the build engine. So Duke Nukem 3D as a good game, as an influential game, seems like a shoo-in for the list. I don't honestly see how they left it off. It just seems like someone played Duke Nukem Forever and was like, this is terrible, therefore I retroactively hate Duke Nukem 3D. That's fine, that's their business, but they are incorrect, and I'm going to try to fix that. Another one that they left off that I think they foresaw people being frustrated with is Blood. And I do like that game, but I totally get why they wouldn't put it on the list, because it's just a thematic conversion of Duke 3D. It's got a sort of in-your-face, you know, bombastic protagonist, or, you know, he quips, he's a smart aleck. That's not really special. The weapons, similar story. I mean, like the dynamite is just the same thing as the little pipe bombs. There's a lot of similarities there. I don't think Blood really stands proud of Duke 3D. Like, if you're not going to put Duke 3D on the list, you absolutely don't put Blood on the list. And once you have Duke 3D on the list, you don't really need Blood on the list. You know, it's just does not stand proud enough from Duke 3D. So that's my opinion, obviously. So let's hit the list. Number 50, they put Marathon on there. And I'm, on the one hand, very glad that they saw fit to put Marathon on the list. But honestly, I don't think they put it up high enough. And I think there's a couple of reasons for it. Like, first of all, this isn't just about games that are good. I think it's about games that are influential. So you can talk about Marathon just being a fabulous game, but let's talk about the influence, right? So being the game for Mac users, you know, this was the Mac shooter. This is an important game because it supplied that whole side of the market. I think Mac is terrible artiste garbage today. 90s Apple users, they deserved our respect. Modern day Mac users, no, absolutely not. But Marathon was important to, the Mac environment. And then just as a game, the influences of the game itself, it has mouse look, it has dual wielding, and it has a really in-depth, detailed story told throughout the actual levels. It's actually told live throughout the game. It's not in cutscenes between levels, it's not like, a chapter screen. It's a story told to you as you play. So I would probably put Marathon a lot higher up on the list, but that's only really if I thought that the numbers were all that important. Number 49, they put Fear, which I think is a pretty solid pick. I don't have anything against that pick in the top 50. Fear is a great game. I don't think it has the most amazing story and the most amazing setting. Really, the whole plot of Fear is just an excuse to string you from epic firefight to epic firefight. And it's got sort of of course, the game layout itself is very Half-Life, and the enemies that you fight are very reminiscent of the Half-Life Hecumarines. But it also is trying to use the slow motion and the environment destruction, the bullet impact effects. It's trying to get kind of almost more of like a John Woo, really epic shootout kind of thing. And I personally, some people could probably get bored of how repetitive the game could be, but I think that the gameplay, the actual firefights are so good that it sustains you throughout the entire game, to the point where even though I don't really care for the story, and I think the jump scares are really cheap, especially no replayability, because between the shootouts you're just walking down a scary hall, basically. That being said, I have no problem seeing the game through to the end because I wanted to keep having great shootouts. So I think that's a very impressive gameplay design. Totally earns a spot on the list. Number 48 is Xenoclash. I'm like, why Xenoclash? I don't think I've ever met anybody who played it and thought anything other than, yeah, it's an alright gimmick. I don't know. I think this must have been a game that the writer of this list played and thought, well, this is actually pretty good, and liked it maybe more than it deserved. I'm not sure, what, I don't think of it as a standout game. I definitely don't think of it as an influential game. First-person Melee, maybe they didn't play Breakdown, maybe they didn't play Chronicles of Riddick. Although, actually, no, because Chronicles of Riddick hits higher up on the list. So, yeah, honestly, this one doesn't make any sense. So I would say let's redress an issue. Let's smack Unreal in there. They did not put Unreal 1 on this list. I don't really know why I want Unreal on the list. Probably just for the influence of the engine, because the game itself is pretty fun sci-fi shooter. And I know when I first played it, it starts off, you're in the ship, it just seems like another corridor shooter, and then you go outside. You take the vent, you crawl outside, and you're like, holy shit, I'm out in the world. I think that was a pretty cool moment. So let's just pencil Unreal in there at number 48 because it's at least better than Xenoclash. Number 47, Wolfenstein Enemy Territory, which is a pretty good pick. That's tough because Wolfenstein 3D is not on the list, and that one seems like a really obvious, super superficial depth. Like if you don't know anything about video games and somebody said, what's the most influential shooter of all time, you'd be like, I don't know, Wolfenstein 3D. But I could almost make a better case for it than Enemy Territory, although Enemy Territory was really fun. They specifically call out Return to Castle Wolfenstein at the very end. They say that it doesn't get on the list, but it's close. I don't think there's anything really wrong with Wolfenstein Enemy Territory, that's fine. Number 46 is Serious Sam HD, The First Encounter. Fuck that game. But, no, seriously, I think I get it, but I don't understand why they would pick the HD remake over the actual original game. I sometimes see a tendency in these sort of lists to put new games on the list instead of their much more influential predecessors, and I think it's just, I don't know if it's to get clicks or if it's just to sort of make it seem like they're with the times or something, but most of the time there really is no reason to put, the more recent sequel to an influential game. It just doesn't make sense. So in this case, I don't know, I'm sure Serious Sam fans could tell me one way or the other, but I'll grudgingly accept the game on the list, But I would still say just put the original Serious Sam on there, not the First Encounter, or HD, not the HD remake. So number 45 is Call of Juarez Gunslinger, which is, yeah, it's just exactly what I just talked about. Why Gunslinger? Call of Juarez, maybe. Bound in Blood, more likely. But still, neither of those particularly. And Gunslinger, like, I didn't even know that game came out. I never heard anything about it. When I read this list, I looked up a YouTube video. The game looks like dog shit. So maybe that's just the brief piece of gameplay that I saw. I should play the game. But if you really love Call of Juarez, put like an earlier Call of Juarez game on there, one that kicked off the series and really got it going, not the 2013, 24, whenever it came out, the sequel that just sort of pooped out after they completely blew it with the cartel. So I'd say no Call of Juarez. I don't think any of them are deserving of this list, but maybe I could make the case for Soldier of Fortune 2 Double Helix. I know neither Soldier of Fortune game is super amazing, and their big party piece is just the whole dismemberment mechanic. And, as far as that goes, I say Soldier of Fortune 2 is the better game. Soldier of Fortune 1, a little too linear, too arcadey. SOF 2 improves that fancy gore mechanic, has a really epic gatefold spread on the box, which explains, here's all the little parts you can blow off a guy. So I would say Soldier of Fortune 2, I don't know, just for the hell of it. Number 44 is Tron 2.0, which seems like a really outside pick, but I guess I can see it. I don't have anything bad to say about Tron 2.0. It just seems kind of surprising. Number 43, Metro 2033 Redux. I really don't like Metro 2033. I can almost see the argument, except that Stalker is a much better fit for this list. Stalker is also already on the list, much higher up. So Metro 2033, I guess. I never played the Redux. Maybe the Redux fixed a lot of the bullshit that I didn't like about the actual game. I guess. Whatever. I'm not going to argue this one. Number 42, Bulletstorm. Why would you put... What the fuck? Are you kidding me? So let's bang Ghost Recon in there, because that's a better pick. Not that influential, really, I don't think, in the long term. Not even the most incredible game ever, but Ghost Recon's a lot of fun. There were a lot of Ghost Recon games. People played a lot of it online, and it's better than Bulletstorm. Number 41, they put Descent, which is perilously close to breaking their FPS rule. I mean, it's not really a simulator. I guess you could say it's more like a flight kind of game. I don't know. I think you could argue that it's a first-person shooter. And once you've decided that it's a first-person shooter, then hell yeah, it goes on the list. It's just trying to argue that Descent is an FPS is really tough. 40, Team Fortress 2. Team Fortress 2 has turned into sort of a monster, but there's no real reason it shouldn't be on the list. Number 39, No One Lives Forever 1. I never liked NULF 1. I think NULF 2 was a bit better, but I don't think the games were totally carried by that kind of charming atmosphere. Maybe for some people that was enough to keep them going, but I needed a little more, and I always thought the gameplay of Lithtech, most generic Lithtech games, is just super basic, and I did not have a lot of fun with NULF 1. So if this was my list, maybe I would say NULF 2, but I'm still not sure where was the influence really. I don't think it's a super amazing game. So I guess if you think it's a super amazing game, sure, you could put it on there. I would argue for something that is not only great, but also influential, and I honestly don't see either of those for NULF 1. Number 38, Titanfall 2, which is interesting. I think people have liked Titanfall 2 better than they liked Titanfall 1. I haven't played it yet, so I don't know for sure. This seems like one of those picks that's just like a new pick for the sake of having a new pick on the list. I don't think Titanfall 2 has really stood the test of time, but I haven't played it, so like maybe I'd play it, maybe it'd blow my mind. I'd be like, oh my god, this game is an instant classic. I don't think so, but I wouldn't change it. 37, Aliens vs. Predator. There we go. That is a good pick. I like that. The series kind of never was ever so good again, but that's certainly not the fault of Alien vs. Predator 1. Number 36 is Halo, and I honestly think Halo is only on there as a technicality because it's absolutely influential, and it's a phenomenal series, but not as a PC game. Like, the PC port's it's not like that shitty PC port or something, but the series would have been just as influential if the PC port never materialized. So the fact that Halo was on PC is the technicality that gets it on this list, but Halo's not important as a PC game. I mean, if you take the PC requirement off of this, then Halo not only gets on the list, but gets a lot fucking higher on the list. Now, you can argue that Halo's influence is bad. I don't think it's all bad, but you cannot argue its influence. And you cannot, I don't think, you can't really argue that Halo is a bad game. Like, it's a freaking fantastic game, great series, extremely influential, and would be one of the top 10 if this was not a PC-only list. And then, of course, maybe you could also get GoldenEye on there. You know, the thing is that if this was not a PC-only list, it wouldn't change in a lot of ways. Halo would go higher, you'd get GoldenEye on there, maybe Time Splitters would sneak its way on if I wasn't looking too close. I don't like Time Splitters that much. Otherwise, what else? I mean, what is there? Like, that's pretty much it. Those are the two console shooters that would get on this list. Maybe I'd put Breakdown on there. I don't know, just be an asshole. So, yeah, anyways, Halo, great series. Definitely a touchstone of the genre, but as a PC game, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter that it's a PC game. Number 35, Rainbow Six Siege. Fuck off. Why put so many new games on this list anyway? I think that it's a mistake to put these new games on the list instead of giving the nod to the actually influential games. So I would replace Rainbow Six Siege with Rainbow Six Rogue Spear, which is, I think, the first really solid game in the Rainbow Six series. And, I mean, depending on how pessimistic you are, it was the last good one. I don't think that's necessarily true. Rainbow Six 3 was very good. Vegas was at least playable. But Rogue Spear, the high point of the Rainbow Six franchise, far more worthy of this list than Rainbow Six Siege is. Number 34, it's another one. It's Arma 3. It's like, what the fuck? Are you the worst Arma game? What the hell? Why the fuck would you put Arma 3 on this list? The obvious pick is Op Flash, so I'm putting Op Flash there. Op Flash, you know, probably the best in the series. You know, they tried to modernize it with Armas 1, 2, and 3, and I think Arma 2 may be the best in the series, but Op Flash, great game, definitely the most influential. I could see Arma 2. I think the last time that I saw one of these lists, it was maybe like a top 100 PC games of all time, and they put Arma 3 and Arma 2 on that list. This might have been PC Gamer or PC Gamer UK or something. And I was just like, you know, what are you kidding me? Why put two of them on there? First of all, and second of all, why Arma 3? Like, you know, if I had to put two Arma games, one of them would be Op Flash, one of them would be Arma 2. Those are the two good ones. Arma 1 was an abortion. Arma 3 was just a mess. Anyway, number 33, Star Wars Republic Commando, which is a really weird pick, because it is a good game, but it's not much of a shooter, and the only real party piece was that you had some squad controls, which, I don't know, like, who was super impressed by that? I'm not honestly totally sure, because it came out around the same time or later than, you know, for example, Rainbow Six 3. And as a PC game, I don't know. I mean, this one makes sense to me in sort of an Xbox list. Like, Star Wars Republic Commando was a great shooter on the Xbox, but I could give you a better pick on both the Xbox and the PC, which is Brothers in Arms, Road to Hill 30, and or Earned in Blood. I think they can both go on there. They're basically the same game. That was a game that had much more depth, a much more inventive mechanic. I think overall a much more solid game. So unless it's just like, oh, Star Wars Republic Commando did something cool with the Star Wars license, that's true, but I don't think that gives it a spot on the list. Number 32, Shadow Warrior. The sequel to the remake of Shadow Warrior. Not just like Shadow Warrior. That just seems stupid to me. So why don't just put Shadow Warrior on there? Have your millennial audience just Google something. They'll get it. They're smart. They know how to use the fucking internet. Number 31 is Far Cry 4, which is retarded. Utterly retarded. They've got Far Cry 2 higher up on the list, and that one actually makes sense, which I'll get to later. But I think Far Cry 4 is a bullshit pick. It's the same fucking shit. Every single game is just like Far Cry 4. Why the hell Far Cry 4? So anyways, my pick would be Medal of Honor Frontline, because they didn't put any Medal of Honor games on the entire list at all. So Medal of Honor Frontline has that, the D-Day mission, and is arguably I wouldn't say arguably, I think that's probably the most successful game in the whole Medal of Honor franchise. It's the big one on PC. Like, you could argue maybe about Medal of Honor on the PS1, whatever. But Medal of Honor Frontline, huge game on the PC, kind of the go-to game when you think about Medal of Honor. So that one makes a lot more sense than frickin' Far Cry 4, Jesus. Number 30, Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, which, yeah, totally makes sense. Probably that's when the whole set-piece-oriented gameplay kind of solidified. If I'm being totally honest with you, I prefer Modern Warfare 2. Weird, I know, I can explain, but not now, I don't have time. So, yeah, fine. Modern Warfare 1 makes more sense on the list than Modern Warfare 2 does, definitely. Number 29 is another weird one. They put Jedi Knight Mysteries of the Sith, which is weird to me that they would try to differentiate between the game and the expansions so much. And they make the point that Mysteries of the Sith kind of tells a better story, a little more focused, has some better gameplay, I guess. And, I'm not going to argue that point, but I just see the two games as a single unit. So I think that, anything that's in Mysteries of the Sith totally counts. I wouldn't say the best RPG of all time is Elder Scrolls Blood Moon. You know what I mean? Morrowind. It's all Morrowind. It adds to Morrowind. So this, Mysteries of the Sith. I just say Star Wars Jedi Knight. Superb game, great expansion, definitely worthy of the list. And then 28, Star Wars Dark Forces 1. So I say, Dark Forces 2, Jedi Knight is a vastly superior game, and it's one of the truly standout 90s PC games. But at the same time, I could totally understand putting Dark Forces 1 on there first, just because, frickin' Star Wars FPS, you kidding me? Knock it out of the park. Number 27 is Rising Storm, which is the Pacific Theater half of Red Orchestra 2, and that is a really good pick. I love Red Orchestra 2, I love Rising Storm. I think not only is it an excellent game, but it really stands apart from a lot of other multiplayer shooters, because it has that kind of great asymmetrical warfare that you can't really get in most games. Number 26 is The Chronicles of Riddick, Assault on Dark Athena, which is just the PC version. That's interesting. I feel like that's another technicality. I think the Xbox version was a lot more successful, but, if it's an excuse, to get it on the PC list, that's fine. It was a really good game, and more importantly, the influential side of it was that it was great use of a movie license. And one of those rare instances where the licensed game really rose above the film. The Chronicles of Riddick movie, a little bit insane. But yeah, that's a great game, if that's what it takes to get it on the PC list. Technicality, that's fine. Number 25 is Call of Duty 2, which is another pretty good pick. I really see Call of Duty 2 as the first next-gen, it's not next-gen, it's not even last-gen, it's 2 gens ago. 2 gens ago it was next-gen. How many gens is that? Yeah, but it was the first next-gen game from the 360 and PS3 era. Not like that means it's the best game ever or anything, but it was really, I think it was the first game where a lot of gamer people and gaming publications especially were like, oh, the next gen is finally here. Just in terms of a big game with pretty graphics, and really took the Call of Duty franchise into the new world order established by Halo, with the weapon, the 2 weapon switching, the regenerating health, but also sort of started us down that path of scripted epic background cutscene stuff. And it is a solid game, so yeah, totally makes sense. Number 24, Dishonored 2, which doesn't fit your goddamn criteria. It's not an FPS. So, I mean, if you're gonna break the criteria this bad, then put fucking System Shock 2 in there. System Shock 2 is just a great game. Not an FPS, no, but if that rule doesn't matter to you, then fuck it, let's put System Shock 2 in here. But, I'm not gonna do that. I'm just gonna take this game off the list, and I'm gonna say, how about a Red Faction game? Why not Red Faction? Red Faction 1, you could say not a great game. Yeah, it's an okay game, but it does have that environmental destruction, which super influential. So Red Faction, better on this list than Dishonored 2. Number 23 is Unreal Tournament 2004, which is a really excellent game, and I would totally want to put it on this list, but I think I'd have to give the nod to the original Unreal Tournament, just because it really, obviously it kickstarted the series, was probably even more successful than Unreal, actually definitely more successful than Unreal, and Unreal Tournament was so good and so complete that I think you can go back to it after playing Unreal Tournament 2003, 2004, Unreal Tournament 3, all those games in this franchise, and not feel like you're missing much in Unreal Tournament. Like, it's got those big, beautiful levels, really solid, excellent game. So I would say, give the nod to the classic, put Unreal Tournament on here, and, just accept that really covers the whole Unreal Tournament series. Like, by putting Unreal Tournament on here, you're not snubbing UT2K4, you're just saying that Unreal Tournament's a great series that gets on this list. So that's the way I see it. I mean, I guess if they're really only talking about single games, which is why they put an expansion of Jedi Knight as one of their picks, I can see why you would say Unreal Tournament 2004, definitely the peak. I would say the whole series can be summed up with Unreal Tournament. So that's what I would do. Number 22 is Alien Isolation, which again does not fit the criteria. Like, they have a stealth games list, and I would see Alien Isolation as more of a stealth game. Just because it has first-person perspective and it does have shooting in it, I don't really think that makes it a shooter. So I'd say let's get this off of here, and let's throw out kind of a weird outside pick, and let's go with Command & Conquer Renegade, which, pretty good game, not like a, world-beating 10 out of 10 amazing, memorable game, but it had a really cool multiplayer idea that I think definitely qualifies as influential. So it's got that kind of, commander mode where somebody plays commander and then the rest of the troops run around. Sort of a fusion of RTS and FPS, which, influential in terms of Savage and Savage 2, games that were directly inspired by it. But also little bits of it kind of started to show up like in later Battlefield games where you've got commanders giving orders and other stuff like that. Or managing resources, maybe more Battlefield 2. But yeah, so I'd say Command & Conquer Renegade had a lot of multiplayer influence. Number 21 is Wolfenstein: The New Order, and yeah, I guess I could see that. I would say that the game would get on there more because it sort of started this like FPS revival. Just to spoil the rest of the list here, Wolf 3D doesn't get on this list, which, given some of the bullshit that they put on here, seems like a real travesty. But Doom 2016 also makes the list, and I don't think that one really counts for reasons that I'll get to. But I say Wolfenstein: The New Order, sort of like showed people, hey, look, FPS games can still be like fun and action-packed. You don't have to surrender to the mass market appeal to still make a good shooter. So that one, I think it's way too high on the list. If the numbers matter, then it's way too high on the list. I don't think the numbers really matter. This is all just a collection of games that are good. So yeah, totally fine. Number 20 is Natural Selection 2, a game which I've never played and nobody I've ever met or talked to has ever played. So perhaps you can enlighten me. Maybe this game is so excellent that it deserves this position. If not, I'll just go with the dinosaur theme and say I'd rather see Turok 2 on this list. I've never even played the PC version of Turok 2. If it's anything like the PC version of Turok 1, then it really doesn't flex PC muscle. But it's just, Turok 2 is a great game, good multiplayer, and technically it did come out on the PC, so I'd rather have that than Natural Selection 2. Number 19 is Crysis, which is more of a meme than a game, but I guess it's okay. Just in terms of influence, Crysis probably does carry a lot of influence, and then of course there's the entire can it run Crysis, it's like the ultimate litmus test, it's the ultimate benchmarking game, definitely gets in there as an influential game. In terms of being a good game, I don't really see it me personally. Like, why would you put Crysis on there but not the original Far Cry? And to be perfectly honest with you and indulge in a little bit of video game hipsterism, the better pick would maybe be Chrome. I really like Chrome. Chrome got the drop on Far Cry by about a year. But even before that was Project IGI. Project IGI, I'm Going In, which really probably was one of the very first, semi-open world shooters, where you're dropped in a big map, the enemy has a fixed position, and you sort of scout it and then assault it. which is what happens in Chrome, which is what happens in Far Cry, and which is what happens in almost all of these like open world map control FPS games that come out now. So I can totally see Crysis, but I would have been just as okay with them putting Project IGI because of the obvious lineage, you know, the DNA from IGI that you can see in Chrome, in Far Cry, in Crysis, and in every other game that comes out now. Number 18 is Super Hot. Indie bullshit with a bullshit indie gimmick, and they're asking way too much for that piece of shit game. They're asking $25 for like a 5-minute gimmick. I can't even imagine it lasting for more than 5 minutes. And honestly, it's a really tiny little change. Like, oh, what if we do this tiny little tweak for a basic FPS and just see how that plays out? Like, it's a total experimental 5-minute, $5 indie game. Totally undeserving of this list. A much better pick would be Receiver, which is the gun handling experiment game, because of how it tries to sort of extrapolate a mechanic into something huge. Like, okay, the simple shooting a gun, now you have to do all of that work yourself. You have to load the magazine, you have to insert the magazine, you have to retract the slide, you have to release the slide, you have to do all this shit yourself. And not only is it a cool experiment in realism, but it also kind of proves that you could control every little lever and every little button on your gun in real time. And it's possible. Like, I liked it so much that I played it to the point where I got really good at reloading quickly, despite the fact that the game uses half a freaking keyboard just to shoot and reload a gun. So Receiver, absolutely, for being a glorious experiment. And I don't know what they charge, like $3 for the game or something like that. It's not an expensive game. It's surprisingly fun. Lasts for probably longer than fucking Super Hot does. And also, if you order any of their other games, they just throw in a copy of Receiver. Like, they're like, try this out. It's a fun thing we did. And it, yeah, totally deserves this list. Super Hot, number 18. You gotta be fucking kidding me with that. Number 17, Quake 3 Arena. I have no comment. I never played Quake 3 Arena. I was an Unreal Tournament guy, but definitely makes the list. I understand it. That's fine. Number 16 is Battlefield Bad Company 2, which is interesting. It's another one of those duplicate things because 1942 hits the list, so I'm not sure why they would want to pick, you know, an older game and a newer game. But I understand that you'd want to put Bad Company 2 on here because it probably is the best game in the series. I would say you don't need more than one Battlefield game on the list, and if you're only going to have one Battlefield game on the list, 1942 is the obvious pick. But you know, Bad Company 2, yeah, I mean, I don't really have anything else I could slot in there, but that works pretty well. Number 15 is SWAT 4, which is great. It's a fucking great game. I'm glad it got this high on the list. It's good to see that game getting some recognition, because SWAT 4 really is probably one of the best, you know, slow-paced, super realistic tactical shooters ever made. I think SWAT 3 is a lot of fun, and Rainbow Six Rogue Spear, Ghost Recon, those games are really good. But none of them really shrunk it down and cranked up the level of detail like SWAT 4 did. You know, SWAT 4 really said, you know, let's simulate the minutia of this. Let's do everything. So, you know, having the equipment like the wand to look under the door, having different non-lethal options, having to tie people up to bag the evidence, you know, it carries on from SWAT 3, but totally amps up the detail. Really good, really focused game. Freaking love SWAT 4. Absolutely goes on the list. Number 14, Battlefield 1942. I already just talked about Battlefield, but yeah, this is the one that should be on the list. And, you know, I have nothing bad to say about 1942. It was super revolutionary. You could say that Codename Eagle technically invented it. That game was broken. Nobody played it. Never heard of it. And you don't hear about that game until you Wikipedia search Battlefield 1942. It was not the influential game 1942 was. Number 13 is PlanetSide 2. I never played PlanetSide or 1 or 2, and I asked a bunch of people, and none of them ever played PlanetSide. So, from my perspective, the game was not that influential or great. Maybe it was. Maybe I somehow just missed the whole thing. But I would say, just based on my own personal experiences, I would say this is a good spot for Wolfenstein 3D. Makes more sense to me than PlanetSide. Number 12, BioShock 2. Oops, you broke your own criteria again. You go in this whole spiel, System Shock 2 doesn't count because it's not an FPS. Oh, BioShock 2. Right, so BioShock is just like a different themed version of System Shock 2. BioShock 2 was the sequel nobody wanted. I don't get this one. BioShock has more shooting in it and more shooting mechanic than System Shock does. So if you're going to put a BioShock game in, put BioShock 1, the game that everybody loves, the game that, was very influential and was lauded. It's got problems, yeah, but BioShock makes more sense than BioShock 2, at least to me. I think it's too high on the list, probably, but that's fine. Number 11 is Left 4 Dead 2, and this is one of those situations where I think Left 4 Dead 2 is much better than Left 4 Dead 1, so I'm not gonna complain about them taking the sequel over the original. Left 4 Dead 1 was kind of like a half-baked, decent little experiment, but Left 4 Dead 2 was a far superior game, so that's fine. Number 10, Far Cry 2. Yes, I'm with Reverend Anthony on this one. I think Far Cry 2 is a broken, unfinished game, and yet it's still incredible. RPS has like a little write-up for why they picked Far Cry 2, and I think they totally identified the reason why I like the game. And it's interesting that they compare it favorably to Far Cry 4 in a lot of ways, but they still put Far Cry 4 on the list. I mean, it seems like these reasons to me are why Far Cry 4 could never achieve the same heights as Far Cry 2. So basically, the whole thing is that Far Cry 2 does not give you a ridiculous amount of powers. And I know people will not play a game now unless you have a whole unlock tree of perks and shit. But Far Cry 2 didn't have any of that. It was just a shooter in kind of an open world, and it gave you this toolkit to use. Not a literal toolkit, but it gave you a bunch of abilities. You had this little sort of toolkit you could go to. So you sneak up on an enemy base, you scout it out, you plan your attack, and then you go in, and you are not you don't have any overpowered abilities like Far Cry 3, which allows you to mark and track enemies, you can see shit through walls, you can stealth effortlessly because you can see exactly your awareness, the awareness of each enemy. You have one-hit takedowns, you have ridiculous takedown chaining, like all that bullshit. Far Cry 2 doesn't have any of that. Like, it is so much better to play that game because you have to pay attention. You really have to play it for real. And that's something that doesn't happen a lot anymore. Almost every single game now is loaded with a ton of perks that make you like a ridiculous combat demon, which is fun enough for, I guess, for a few minutes, but really does not strike me as being all that impressive. And especially in those games, even like the new Deus Ex games, even without any of those unlockable perks, you're already way too overpowered. So, yeah, Far Cry 2, it's great. Maybe I should talk about it in detail sometime. But absolutely, I would put this on the list. Number 9 is Counter-Strike Go. Wrong again. Counter-Strike 1.0, motherfuckers. CSGO is like a carbon copy of the existing games, but with more DLC chicanery and microtransactions. I don't see why this game should be on the list just because it's popular right now. It doesn't make any sense. Counter-Strike was the influential game and really excellent. Maybe Counter-Strike Source you could argue as being the big hit. But CSGO is just bullshit. And it doesn't really add or change all that much. I think the games are all so similar that it's possible that you could have played so much Counter-Strike 1.0 that you would never even need to play Source or Go. This seems like a really stupid, just, trying too hard to be with the times kind of pick. Number 8, Half-Life 2. Fuck it. That's fine. Half-Life 2 can get on the list for being influential, if not necessarily good. I appreciate this, at least, because the last time I read one of these top 50 or top 100 games list, I'm pretty sure Half-Life 2 beat Half-Life 1, which I think is just a travesty. But, yeah, I mean, how could you not put Half-Life 2 on there? Everybody fucking loves that game. Whatever, I don't give a shit. Number 7, Overwatch, which I don't think is at all a valid pick, because they already got Team Fortress 2 on the list, and as fun as Overwatch may be, and as much as people may be enjoying Overwatch, Team Fortress 2 was the progenitor. It is the classic game. Overwatch is just the thing people are playing right now. And, maybe history will prove me wrong. Maybe Overwatch will go on to be bigger. I don't really know. But this is actually where I would stick Marathon. Like, I would stick Marathon way up here in the top 10. But that's just my personal ridiculous Bungie bias. So if I was putting Marathon way up here, then I'd have to fill Marathon's spot with something. And I guess I would say Delta Force Black Hawk Down, which is a weird, I'm sure a weird pick. I know that game is not amazing. None of the Delta Force games were ever really amazing games. I liked them, but, You know, they were just sort of solid middle market shooters. But Black Hawk Down, first of all, good in that it tells the real story pretty well. I think it does a good job of telling it. It's kind of a cinematic game, and it's a much earlier cinematic style game that didn't really start happening until years later. So in a way, it was kind of the vanguard of the Call of Duty cinematic style, you know, seeing the Black Hawk go down in the distance. That kind of, you know, kind of epic, scripted, set piecey stuff mixed in with a competent shooter. So I would say Black Hawk Down, sure, I could see it eking on to the 50 spot, and then let's give Marathon number 7. Get it? 7. Marathon can be 7th. Number 7. Okay. Number 6 is Doom 2016, which I don't think makes sense. I think Doom 2016 is kind of amazing in the context of 2016 when good FPS games didn't get made anymore, but I don't think it's going to reach levels of greatness or influence, which is what the whole list seems to be about. So, like Wolfenstein, The New Order, I think that's the correct pick for the FPS revival, you know, because it beat Doom 2016 by a few years, and that's already on the list. Like, that's the better pick for the, you know, throwback shooter, you know, balls to the wall, badass shooter in the modern era, you know, that sort of goes against convention. Doom 2016 is not really breaking new ground in that regard. Really good game, but only because it's 2016, because it came out in 2016. If it came out at any other time, it would just be another pretty good shooter, I think. So this is where I would slap in Duke 3D for the reasons that I talked about ages ago. Number 5 is Devil Daggers, which is, no way in hell, man. Are you kidding me? I played Devil's Daggers, and it's like a super basic little indie project. It's not a great game. It's not an influential game. It's not an important game. It's just kind of a, you know, it's a nice-looking, retro-y, pixely arena shooter. You're just in a tiny little circle, and you run around. I'm sure Serious Sam fans would love it. All you do is strafe out of the way of incoming projectiles while you shoot back a bunch. It's, yeah, no way in hell does it get on this list, and absolutely no way in fucking hell does it get to number 5. Are you fucking kidding me? This is an indie cred pick. There's just no other way to explain it. So I would say, how about Tribes? Tribes didn't make it onto this list. No Tribes games, so let's put Tribes 1 or 2. I don't think it really matters. 2 was never really patched to be playable, but Tribes 1, definitely. Tribes 2 is the game I played more, but wow, whatever. Number 4 is Stalker Shadow of Chernobyl. And as much as I love Stalker, I think it might be a bit too high on the list. I think it's a tremendous singular game, but I don't think it's had much impact on the industry. Unless you count Metro 2033, which is a straight-up carbon copy made by basically the same people. Yeah, I don't see Stalker as being this enormous game changer, although it really is an excellent game, and just for how unique it is and for what a classic it is, definitely the first Stalker game. Although obviously Call of Pripyat is probably the one that's actually playable. Clear Sky is a big waste of time. I really like Stalker, but I don't know. I could see putting it on this list. I just don't see putting it this high on the list. Number 3 is Doom, which is, totally, definitely deserves to be there. That's a good number for it. That's fine. Number 2 is Half-Life, and number 1 is Quake. Now, I understand why they would put them like this, and my personal pro Half-Life bias means that I'm going to say I would put Half-Life 1 at number 1, and I would do so because of the influence. So, I am over the moon to see them place Half-Life 1 ahead of Half-Life 2 for once. I would even put it above Quake. And I think it's because Half-Life 1 not only is such a great game, but also has a huge amount of influence. This is the game that invented scripted sequences, for all intents and purposes. You can argue whether or not that was a good influence on the industry, but at the time it was fucking incredible. And it had a huge influence. Maybe it was a bad influence. Maybe people shouldn't have copied it, but it's not Half-Life's fault that people copied it badly. So I would say Half-Life 1, top PC FPS game of all time, absolutely. That being said, they put Quake up there, and I think depending on who you are and what you're interested in, absolutely Quake. On the one hand, Quake is kind of just a tech demo. Like, it's a new 3D engine, holy shit, we're rendering 3D, look how smooth it is, it's fully 3D, isn't this amazing? Excuse plot, super basic gameplay, solid meh, except It's all about multiplayer and influence. So the influence of the engine, the game engine, which Quake is just everything. For example, Half-Life is Quake, right? And I don't remember exactly, but I think even Call of Duty is still Quake 3, right? Like, they used Quake 3 to make the first Call of Duty game, and they never stopped. They just kept using that same engine. So Quake, enormously influential engine in the industry. And in terms of multiplayer, I never really played Quake multiplayer. Like I said, I was an Unreal Tournament guy, but I know people who played the shit out of Quake multiplayer, Quake 1, 2, and 3. And yeah, definitely the multiplayer with the modability, like Team Fortress, the original Team Fortress, for example. Tons of mods, tons of custom content, and then also the server browser, like an easy way to find and get into multiplayer games. Quake is a really, really close second for me. I totally get why they put it at number 1. Anyway, so that's my whole 1 hour's worth of talking. Hopefully I'll have edited it down to something significantly shorter than 1 hour, but you know, I like it when these lists come out. I don't like the lists themselves. I think they're always wrong, but they do give me a good excuse to complain about shit and talk about video games, so it's kind of fun. They did other ones. They did like a top 25 stealth games list. I'm not the biggest stealth game buff, so I wouldn't try to speak to that one. And then PC Gamer is always putting out a revised top 100 games of all time list, PC games of all time list, obviously. And that one has become an abomination in recent years. The classic Deus Ex is the number 1 PC game of all time thing came from PC Gamer. You know, back when they were not stupid. They kind of recognized that Deus Ex was the greatest PC game of all time, which is a bit of a goofy meme / joke, but it is at least a pretty accurate one. And they've revised their list since then to include a lot of fancy new bullshit, and I'm pretty sure they put Half-Life 2 at the top of the list last time, which, shoot me in the fucking head, that's terrible. Anyway, that was more than enough talking. I'm gonna get back to doing other things. Catch you all on the flip side, as they say, out on the highway. See ya.